Recording in progress.
I think he fits within our policy. Yes. I need to say that, right?
Yeah, I probably should make it.
Yeah, okay. And we have enough for quorum. Everybody else is here. Tell me when we're live. We are live. All right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee for Thursday, December 15th, 2022. Welcome to everybody. We do have quorum in the room, but under our policy, I just want to state that Mike Sigler is on a out of the city, or out of the county rather, on a legitimate reason where he fits within our policy, that he is able to attend the meeting remotely. He does not count towards quorum, but under New York state law, he is allowed to participate in the votes and the debate. So, with that said, first order of business is public comment. And I see we have one person with us here in the room. I think we may have some people remotely. We've also received a letter, I think at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. And I'm happy to read that into the record if we want to do that. But otherwise, have we received requests to speak? Okay. Claire.
I think that Beth Harris was going to read the letter via Zoom. She would have been here in person, but because of the roads, or at least that was her request. And I think that Katrina was facilitating that. Is that accurate, Katrina?
She's welcome to read the letter if she's here. Oh, she's signing in. Okay.
I'm here.
All right. Yeah, I'm happy to read it, but I prefer if it's your letter, you can read it. So,
Thank you.
And I assume you're familiar with our rules for presentation to county committees. You have 3 minutes. You know, you have to, I don't want to go down the list, but you can't swear, or you can't comment on the performance of specific non-elected county officials. And I assume you know the rest. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Just a minute. Dear Tompkins County legislators, today the Public Safety Committee is discussing the jail proposed renovations report and considering a resolution in support of evaluating the feasibility of renovating the public safety building. A developing coalition of Tompkins County residents is calling for more clarification, research, and community engagement before voting on this resolution. Today, we ask you to table this resolution until these things are achieved. We appreciate the Public Safety Committee's mandate to make sure that the jail operates in accordance with county requirements and programmatic needs in a safe and efficient manner. However, this mandate requires clarification of all costs involved in the proposed project, interest on the loan for the project, associated personnel costs, for example, and much more community engagement on the details outlined under the new jail renovation project. We suggest that the Public Safety Committee organize a series of public hearings on the issue of a new pod jail and renovation that include peers who have experienced incarceration in the Tompkins County Jail, reentry professionals and nonprofits, local mental health, substance use counselors, and other health workers and defense lawyers. Some of the topics that require further discussion are community awareness and research include unnecessary expense of building pods for 82 beds. Tompkins County has successfully kept the jail population at an average of 45 people annually for the past 3 years. There should be an open discussion on whether an 82-bed new pod jail is necessary given the successful coordination of public safety actions to keep incarceration rates consistently low in the county. The proposal does not respond to a real need and would potentially be a waste of taxpayers' money. 2, unnecessary expense of salaries for required corrections officers for an 82-bed jail facility. If it is necessary to upgrade the living space of those who are incarcerated, this will be a good time to discuss whether the legally required staff for the 82-bed facility is necessary. It makes no sense for taxpayers to have to pay for staff who are not needed. Accountability for proposed allocations for services for those who are incarcerated. The proposed renovations report identifies rooms to be used for classrooms, 12-step meetings, a library, and lawyer meeting rooms. The 2016 jail expansion had also included similar spaces, but they disappeared. The current Public Safety Committee report mentions that space had been dedicated for some of these needs previously, but was repurposed. What administrative mechanisms would prevent this from happening in the future? Unnecessary duplication of community-based services. The plans for the proposed detox crisis stabilization facility should be made with the input of external drug addiction and mental health services personnel so that the jail is not incarcerating people who would be better served within the community. 5, projection of jail operating expenses for 40 years, including new staff, is required so that taxpayers understand the total projected costs of this new jail renovation project beyond the bricks and mortars cost. Tompkins County has been a champion of alternatives to incarceration and decriminalization practices. Yet the county's costs of incarceration have remained the same. Meanwhile, the county invests in programs and services addressing mental health, public health, and employment assistance are in need of additional funding. As it stands, while the current jail proposal addresses some important needs for repurposing space, it also incurs disproportionately costs for unnecessary beds and unnecessary personnel. In 2017, our community found solutions that did not require a new jail. Let's table this resolution until the Public Safety Committee has a chance to engage the necessary experts, people with lived experience, and community members on this project. We ask you that you table this resolution today until this engagement takes place. Sincerely, Paula Ionide, founder of Decarcerate Tompkins County, Beth Harris, Kathy Russell, and Claire Grady. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the committee? Claire.
Hi, yes, thank you. I love getting older.
Actually, could you state your name for the record?
I'm Claire Grady, and I live on Elm Street on the west side. I like that I know all of you seated at the table, and I really thank you for serving us as county legislators and our clerk and our, I forget your role, Lisa.
Oh, administrator.
Anyway, I remember being here for quite a few meetings the last time we had a campaign to decarcerate. And I feel like we learned much and a lot got done. I remember when COVID came, the alarm that we all had for people's safety and people's lives. I was especially alarmed and concerned for people in prison, having been in prison many times and having friends and family in prison. I remember what it was like to find out that not only was our local jail population not up to 70, 80, whatever, but that it was down to 29. And that it even, with a memo from, I think, Rich, was promising to go down to 23. That was huge. We could have been looking at, if we had expanded that jail, several hundred people imprisoned in jail in Tompkins County that we were having to worry about their life for COVID. Instead, we were looking at 23.
My final remark is that that whole process happened because legislators were engaging with community engagement. You are not expected to know everything and be everything. Without community participation, which is what that letter is talking about, this is not a full, honest, just process. So I really plead to each one of your hearts and minds to pause right now. Table this until that community engagement is more full and more just. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the committee? Seeing none, are there any changes to the agenda? I see we have an addition. We have an additional resolution, authorization to accept fiscal year 2021 State Homeland Security Program Grant, Department of Emergency Response. I believe we need a motion to put that on the floor or to add it to the agenda.
You can add it to the agenda, but we're going to withdraw the one in its place.
Oh, this replaces one that's there. Okay.
Correct. ID number 11362.
Okay. Well, can I get a motion to withdraw 11362 and replace it with 11378? Travis moves, Veronica seconds. Any discussion? I'll call the roll. Travis? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so that's unanimous. All right, we have minutes from our November 17th meeting. Could I get a motion to put those on the floor? Veronica moves, Travis seconds. Any questions or comments on our minutes? I'll call the vote. Travis?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. Next item is chair's report. I think there were some things that I had hoped we would discuss. The overdose information, that'll come in the sheriff's report. And I was hoping let's see, Carla and Dan from Probation could talk a little bit about the trauma training that went on, but we can do that during the probation report. So I have no report. I would turn it over to our county administrator, Lisa.
Thank you, Rich. Just a couple of brief updates. As I'd mentioned previously, we are on track to submit our plan to New York State for approval as required by the end of this year, how the county intends to respond to threats of domestic terrorism. And together with the Sheriff's Department, Department of Emergency Response, the DA, assigned counsel, probation, county administration has, and Dominic Recchio has pulled together this report. And in 2023, the sheriff will be leading a threat assessment team made up of community organizations, stakeholders, law enforcement, to respond to and hopefully act to prevent acts of domestic terrorism. So that has been a good process and one which we will continue to learn from. The other thing I wanted to mention.
Is there a deliverable that comes from that, or?
It's a deliverable that goes to the state in terms of a plan, and it is, it's a kind of tactical in nature, so it's not a public.
I would assume there's a confidentiality.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And for that deliverable, the counties will receive ongoing funding and technical support toward these efforts. And then on another topic, Reimagining Public Safety and the Community Justice Center, Mona Lita Smiley has, and our partners with the city have selected a data analyst who will begin in early January. So we're very pleased that position will be starting up and will be working to move a number of plans forward in terms of capturing data and standardizing.
That's great news. thank you for all your work on that. And I'm curious, has the work plan been executed on both sides here?
At the last Common Council meeting, the city voted on both the 2022 and the 2023 work plans. Yes. So.
Veronica?
Yeah, back to the domestic terrorism thing. Is there anything you can share about, I understand the confidentiality thing, but like about what kind of threats you're thinking of, or even things that legislators could know if not published to the public?
Sure. So I think, and what we can probably do is come up with an executive summary for more information, but essentially, as what was outlined in the governor's Executive Order 18, was specifically looking, and it was in response to the horrific acts that occurred in Buffalo at the Top Supermarket that were certainly racially motivated, that there threats of domestic terror involving white supremacy and other ideologies, and ways of providing response in terms of the emergency orders of protection, making our community partners that may be specific targets of these threats aware of action steps to report and respond. And I'd be happy to, if Derek or Mike, who have gone and received some more training, if you wanted to chime in on anything else toward this.
Sure. I think the initial planning is leading us in a direction to create a portal of some sort that's open to the community and other stakeholders, where they can report incidences that may tip us off to acts of domestic terrorism, either directed at a particular church or religious group based on somebody's race, all the key factors that go into what creates a domestic terrorism event from occurring, that we can funnel that through. We can divert tips that we receive to other organizations that may be better suited to handle them. It'll also open up the door for us to work with other stakeholders to come up with better solutions and to protect our community. That's the long and the short of it.
Should also state that there was expressly written in the executive order, we're working in collaboration with schools and mental health, and Frank and Harmony have been partners at the table, and we, through this process, did a stakeholder survey where we engaged and got the feedback from our community partners, the schools, educational institutions, and so forth. So I think we've gathered a lot of good data.
I guess I just comment, we have not had a terrorist event here in our community, either, international or domestic, and we, frankly, I think have just been very fortunate. But it's good to know that there's planning and preparation, because we're not immune, unfortunately. Yeah. Anything further on that? Okay, anything else you have for us, Lisa?
I think those are the highlights. Thank you.
Okay, next up is the Sheriff's Office. Welcome, Derek. And I see Jen and
Ray's here as well.
Captain Bunce.
Right?
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Well, Lisa already explained our work on the task force for the domestic terrorism executive order that came out a while back. We also continue to make headway with our co-response team, working with Frank Krupa. We had a meeting with Mike Steitley and his people today. The undersheriff's been working on a policy on how we will operate under that new model. It seems to be going very well. We have a deputy selected already to take part in that team. A vehicle has been ordered, an unmarked vehicle. So I think it's really headed in a good direction. And talking to the undersheriff today, we're thinking start of February, maybe we'll be up and ready to go. So that's the big thing. Yeah. We continue to work on our recruitment. We've hired a couple new deputies that will be starting the academy here pretty soon. We recently got our new civil service list, which wasn't hugely promising. We had about 12 people on it, I believe, and we've interviewed most of them already. And the list just came out today. So we are hoping to, in addition to the new people we've already hired that will be going to the academy, like I said, at the start of the year in March, we're hoping to get some more lateral transfers to fill in some of our new positions that will be starting at the start of the year. So excited about that. The jail staff recently had a scare, a suicide attempt that the correction officers did a really good job preventing. And we're able to help that individual and get him medical care and prevent a tragedy from happening for sure. I think that's it, Rich. I think I covered everything I had.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing that about the incident at the jail.
Yeah, and Jen's going to talk to you about the overdose report, I believe.
Yes, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot when you sent that email, Jennifer, but I thought it was important information. So I'd like to give you the floor for a minute.
Yeah,
a few minutes.
Absolutely. So just to give a background, I've been sending you the overdose reports for maybe 4 or 5 months now. So where I started from was searching all the overdose nature codes, which would be when dispatch categorizes the call as an overdose. I initially was just searching those calls, and over time I started to expand that because overdose incidents come in a variety of different ways. So now I will search the overdose nature codes, the observed code as an overdose, which means that's how the officer closes the call out, all cardiac arrests, all 2209 mental hygiene law arrests. But oftentimes just monitoring the radio, I'll hear a call that's clearly an overdose as a component of the call, and I'll jot it down to remember to include that into the overdose report for that month. And they come in from a variety of ways. Like last month, there was a personal injury accident where someone had overdosed on an opiate, became unresponsive and subsequently crashed the vehicle. A month before that, there was a disorderly conduct. That's how the call came in. So it's really hard to put a number on all the overdose calls that we're going to. By no means is the report I'm sending you a complete snapshot of what's going on in the county. It's just my best attempt to give you an idea of what kind of calls are coming in and maybe what trends we're seeing. I talked to Mike Staley today, and he spent a lot of time giving me a little bit about how the dispatchers categorize an overdose call, and I appreciate that, Mike. They first start by trying to determine whether it's intentional or accidental, and this could be, someone's accidentally took too much of a prescribed medicine, not necessarily an illicit street drug, and then they try to determine what drug was ingested by that person, whether they're violent or there's a weapon involved, and then that's how they kind of make the determination whether it's an overdose, a poisoning, or if it should be a different nature code. So with all that said, I'm pretty much saying it's really hard to come up with a complete snapshot of all the overdose calls we're going to in the county. This is just my best attempt, and I keep trying to add more in each month. But it takes a little bit of time to read through every report that is labeled as a cardiac arrest to determine whether that was a natural cause or related to some kind of ingestment of a drug.
And that's why I prompted you to speak about it today, because it seems like this is a tremendous amount of work, and it really highlights how hard it is to really understand what's happening in the community in terms of overdoses. That we use that word, but it means so many different things, the range of drugs and the activities people are engaged in and how it impacts them. And I put this question out to you, but also to Michael or anybody else, is there anything we could be doing differently from a process standpoint to capture this information in a better way? I know we've had this conversation ongoing through the year, particularly with the guests we've had who've shared their personal experiences, but I just open it for discussion if there's any thoughts.
I mean, as far as standardizing the data, I think that's going to be a really hard thing to do, just because, like I said, they come in a variety of different ways, and the call ends in a variety of different ways. So to be able to label a call as one particular thing is going to be difficult. I mean, I think relying on the Narcan usage would give you a clear idea of maybe just of opiates or what was suspected opiates. But there's a lot of other illicit drugs that people are overdosing on besides opiates. So I don't have a very good answer to that. I think I rely heavily on the anecdotal stories and communications from the deputies, what they're seeing, as well as people who are involved in the drug court system, whether they're going through as a participant or they work there. Sometimes they see trends and they'll communicate it with me, and then I'll try to look back through reports to kind of confirm that. So I think a lot of it is just listening to the stakeholders and listening to what they're seeing.
Do you think there's something we could do in terms of getting reporting from the distribution points for Narcan in the county to try to say, here's how many we're giving out, and these seem to be, we're giving them out because they were used? I mean, that would protect confidentiality. We wouldn't know where they were used, but maybe that's...
I mean, Frank would probably speak to that more, but there's so many people who can distribute Narcan that I think it's going to be hard. We started those healthy transition packets, so now everyone leaving our facility, part of that packet includes Narcan, so I would never know if it actually got used, but I think there's so many providers that could distribute Narcan that might be really hard, but I imagine Frank would have a better answer.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a better answer, but just to reinforce, what you said, Jen, that it's been given out everywhere. You can get it at pharmacies. Our clinic gives it to anyone that asks for it. It doesn't have to be a drug user. It could be a family member that knows somebody that wants it. There's trainings being offered almost regularly around the county where Narcan is distributed as well. So I don't know that it's really going to give you much more. I don't think there's a way for us to naturally capture that. I guess the one thing I would caution against is I don't know that we need perfection in this data to know what's going on in the community. And honestly, the information that Jen's pulling is probably going to tell us what's happening, right? So if we're seeing numbers going up, we're going to see that in the numbers that Jen's pulling, and whether or not it's 1,000 versus 1,500 overdoses, that's telling us something if it's trending up and down either way. So yeah, I don't have a good answer either on how to get to that number, other than to say I think we have a good idea of what's happening and at least have these kind of data that will flag us on trends that are happening in the community now.
I think I agree with that. This is something where you're never going to get truly accurate, but maybe what we could do is plot some sort of graph on this to see if we can see trends. I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I didn't want to let that pass. So any further comment, question on it? Veronica?
Yeah, this might not be answerable, but, well, first, Jen, I want to echo what others have said. Thank you for putting this together, even with all the caveats you said. I find it helpful to just get a snapshot. I know we've been talking about things like the need for a detox facility and crisis stabilization centers and things. And so, looking at this story, I'm wondering, I know it's probably not knowable, but I'm wondering what's happening to these folks after the interaction with the 911 center or whatever emergency response, or what, because I can imagine from a lot of these incidents, sometimes it's like the situation was fine and they had all the things that they need to take care of whatever was happening, not commenting on what is leading to this substance abuse in the first place. But other times I'm sure there's needs where it's like, oh, if only we had blah, blah, blah in the community, that would have been really helpful here. So I'm wondering if you think, is there any other place we could look, like sort of a slice of information in addition to the 911 calls? And or do you have any thoughts just based on anecdotes that y'all are experiencing or hearing?
So one thing I'll comment just on that is, and we actually talked about this with Mike and his group today, is the co-response team that we were putting in place that it was originally just for mental health crisis. We would like that team to also respond to overdose calls dependent on their availability. Obviously, with just one team, I believe they're going to have a heavy workload, but that's ultimately, we would like them to respond to overdose calls. And I think, Veronica, what you said is that deputy and that mental health clinician having the ability to spend more time with that person and more knowledge about local resources, might be able to give that individual who's in crisis or experienced or who had just gone through an overdose the information that they need, to enter back into the community and have the resources they need. But right now, I'm not familiar with any other organization that's tracking data that would give us a more holistic picture. But we're hopeful that this co-response team, might serve the community in that aspect as well by responding to overdose calls and being a resource to the community in that way as well.
Yeah, and not to mention also that it may provide an avenue for follow-up after the fact. Traditionally, law enforcement would handle a call, the person goes to the hospital, and that's the end of it. With this team, if time allows, it may open up the opportunity to do follow-up after the fact and make sure they are getting exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, more to come there. We just need to keep watching it, I guess. Next item is a report discussion, the Public Safety Committee Jail Proposed Renovations Report. ID 11369. And I assume all the committee members have had a chance to look at the draft documents that are in front of you. One is the resolution, but the other is the draft report. And I'd welcome comment on what's there. If anybody, I guess I put a question out to the committee members. Does this accurately reflect the items we've been talking about regarding the functionality of the jail that we'd like to see? Mike?
I believe it does.
Okay. Travis?
I think it does accurately reflect what we've been talking about, but especially in light of the public comments today, I'd like the request that we change things. I don't know what the...
Well, let's have a conversation about that, because I thought that was an important letter that was presented to us in terms of asking us to do something pretty different than the course we're on. And I'd certainly welcome other committee members' thoughts on it, but I would like to review where we've been. That Travis and Veronica, you're new to this committee, but before the pandemic, we were on course to do this. And we basically put it on the shelf because of the pandemic, but we had proceeded pretty far along in this question of what functionality should be in the jail. As you know, I put it on our draft work plan for 2022. We adopted it as our work plan for this year. We talked about it, I think, in the spring. We talked about doing a jail tour, which we eventually did. Sheriff, I can't remember exactly when that was, but I think it was warm out. And we had an earlier version of this functionality report that we talked about at a meeting maybe in September. And this was then sent out to everybody again in maybe November. We've, had discussion at meetings about it. I have raised this issue repeatedly at legislature meetings and indicated that this is certainly a very important vote. I agree completely with the people who've written the letter that this matters, and we should do it on a very considered basis. But it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that we've been here. We have really worked to do this in a very, very public way over several years. And in fact, in my time on the legislature, I think since 2016, this has been a recurrent subject, and not just functionality at the jail, but the current conditions and the need to do something to address the problems we have at our jail. So I think it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. With that said, I think we should maybe have some discussion about the items raised in this letter. The first being, let's see, there's 5 points I would mention. One is whether we should be putting the number 82 in the report. You know, I think we do want to give direction to the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, at least to move towards or away from. But I'd welcome comment on that. Mike? You're on.
So do you want to go this point by point, or how do you want to?
Sure, let's talk about.
I mean, I was just going to talk on the letter too.
Go ahead.
So I'll just
say what you need to say.
I'll start, and I can always talk later too. Yeah, no, I read the letter. I found it to be very similar, frankly, to the letter that we had 7 years ago when we were discussing this. I really look at it as we're at a point here of decision, whether we're going to have a jail or not have a jail. It's not really a matter of, I don't really see the status quo that we're in right now as being sustainable very much longer. I mean, we were looking at this, like you said, 7 years ago. And I think it was looked at even before then. I mean, this jail was built when I was still in high school. And I think we've made progress on how to house people that are in our custody in the last 4 decades. So, I mean, I took the walk through the jail the same as everybody else, I think. I mean, it certainly is an old facility. It's a facility that's used 24/7. It's, I think, time to, much like when we looked at the jail downtown, I mean, that system was what, cells and bars. And we said, okay, we've advanced beyond this system. We're going to put this new system in up on Warren Road. And I think that we're at that kind of junction point. When it comes to the number 82, I mean, it could be 82, it could be 100. I mean, I guess 82 is kind of where we're landing at. Just because we're on a number 82 doesn't mean, obviously, that we're going to use all of those beds. We're not using all of the beds now. And this sheriff, and I think wisely, we are not a big board-in facility. We are not going to be taking in people from all over the state. But just like we can't go and use the facility over at the old, there was a facility for young women in Lansing that closed. And why can't we use those rooms anymore? Because those rooms are too small. The state upgraded the size of the rooms. And it's the same kind of idea here. I think, if we're not going to have a jail, which kind of seems to be where this letter is calling for, that means we have to board everybody out. And I don't see that as being a good outcome. So I'll stop at that. I mean, I think I addressed 2 of the big issues in that letter. I think that our ideas that we put forward in the last few months about having a jail facility that is humane to people that we're holding, that their families can come into and visit them safely, that their lawyers can come in and visit them safely, that we don't ship them off to a system, frankly, that doesn't maybe correspond to the general feelings of how people should be treated in Tompkins County. I don't really want to ship people out of county for that. And that seems to be kind of where we're at. And it's also, we need to provide a work environment that people want to work at. And I don't really think we can say that anymore at our jail on Warren Road. So I'll stop there, but hopefully I'll get to speak more later.
Thank you, Mike. I would just comment off the top of my head, and I defer to the county attorney, but I think it's County Law Section 217 or 219 requires us to have a jail. There is some talk about allowing regional jails. That is not the law in New York State, to my knowledge, yet. So we have to do something. But yeah, what that is, we have a fair amount of flexibility. Travis, did you have thoughts?
I do. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have a jail. And whether we're holding 40 people or we continue some of the work we do and we get that number down to 25 people, for a variety of reasons, we have to have a jail. It's law, and we're going to need one. As somebody who has been in our jail for a period of time, I know what it looks and feels like. And that was almost 30 years ago, and it hasn't changed. And so it's worse, right? And the idea of incarceration, nobody likes the idea, but it's here. And when we put people in that jail, if we can provide services, if we could help people come out better on the other end, that's what we need to be doing. We don't want to send people to Broome County or Seneca County and away from their family. Transportation is an issue locally, and we're going to be asking people to drive an hour and find transportation to go elsewhere to see people. Hearing from the public is critical, and I know you all have done this exercise over and over at different times, and so I'm new to this process, and we haven't done that part in the last 11 months. But I think if we're going to open that up and we're going to look at that, can we look at it from a lens of this is what we have to do? And so how do we do it in a way that gets as many people what they're looking for as possible? Not do we have a jail or don't we have a jail? Because the alternative is people have to get boarded out. So I'm always open to hear from people and take ideas and have some discourse and come out with something better on the other end, only if everybody is really looking and working toward a better outcome, right? Because otherwise it's pointless. We could have meetings after meetings and debate simple things, but here we are, this is where we're going. The cost is the cost. If we had done it 7 years ago, 14 years ago, 15, we wouldn't be having this cost. It'd be very different. And the longer we put it off, the more it's going to cost. So I'm always open to hear from folks and work with folks and figure out what's the best way forward, as long as we're going into that process with some intentionality to kind of meld some ideas together and do what's best for folks in the county.
Veronica, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, So I haven't heard anyone suggest that we don't have a jail, and wanting that.
We have had people coming
this year.
No.
So I would personally be fine with not considering not having a jail. But yeah, I agree with Travis that hearing from the public is important, and working collaboratively, and that that part of it needs to be some sense of the shared goal. And I hear you on that this whole process has not been done in private, or it's been, as I see it, it's been very public, but not publicized. Because I know and I apologize for being slow on this, I went seeking since our last meeting to talk to some people, folks who don't come to these meetings but are involved in the criminal legal system, and a few of them were surprised. They were like, "Why haven't I been hearing about this?" Which is, I think, because people don't look, but there's just too much going on to follow up with everything. So I think it makes sense, especially when we're thinking about the space for holding people and the services for the people in the jail, to speak with folks who have recently been incarcerated there, or who are working with people getting out of the jail or going into the jail instead of some possible other facility, and then continue to trust the sheriff and Captain Bunce on his staff on the things like the office space and the locker rooms and the sort of stuff that you all are directly using as part of the need. I have more to say, but I'll leave that.
Okay, I'll jump in if that's okay, just to come back to this question of 82 beds. We're saying 82 because it's 82 now. And while we've been running at a much lower number, and frankly, I believe we can be rightfully proud of what we've done in our county from a criminal justice standpoint in looking at our criminal justice system as a system and building the alternatives to incarceration, but also getting everybody kind of thinking along the same lines. I certainly commend our sheriff's department for buying into the alternatives model, but also our judges, our district attorney, our assigned counsel, our social workers, our Marie Boyer, who worked so hard to connect people in trouble with programming, that number is at the very fringe of what we see in our nation in terms of reduced incarceration. We are doing something really remarkable. So I can see looking at this as 82 beds and saying, why do we need 82? Why don't we build 45? And Captain Bunce or the sheriff could certainly talk about the issue of classification. But you don't want to build a jail that's too small, because then you have the issue of board outs. And we do not want Tompkins County residents who become incarcerated to be sent elsewhere. So you want some leeway there, you know, and unfortunately, you build it knowing that you're going to have empty beds some of the time. I would think that if we get cost estimates, if we say picked a number of 60 versus 82, the differential cost isn't going to be very much. That adding the square footage to go from 60 beds to 82 is marginal. 82 has an advantage as well in that it would be very difficult for New York State, which needs to approve our construction plans, to say no. If we try to suggest a much lower number, we are going to have, I think, a difficult conversation with them. Maybe that's not the case because of bail reform, that they would be amenable to a lower number. But that is a discussion we could have going forward. And I would also say that the resolution we're looking at today is the beginning of the process. As much as I talked about what we've done for the last year and before, this is the start. We want to turn this over to the F&I committee to say, let's see you develop plans that accomplishes this functionality and get cost estimates so we can put dollar figures to what this would cost to do. That doesn't absolve the Public Safety Committee of its ongoing responsibility to look at functionality and to hear from everybody in the community to address their issues and to hear them as we go along. So to the 4 people who authored this letter, you know, maybe you're generally distrustful of government, but we do want to hear from you, and we will listen going forward, because we want the best jail we can possibly build, is my view. And that's the way to get there. You know, it will involve a lot of discussion and probably a lot of compromise. But the report that we have in front of us, I think, is a first step to allow us to see what it looks like, to visualize it, and then and see cost, and then go from there. I think there will be a lot of stuff, frankly, left on the cutting room floor. We are going to have to edit, probably because the cost is going to be so high. But I'm reluctant to say let's just wait, because this has been our practice. We've recognized this is a hard thing to do, and so we don't do it. And I think it's time that we have the discussion and see if this is where we want to go. So I'll stop talking and invite others. And Sheriff, if you have a view on this, I'd certainly welcome it, or yours, you know, Jennifer or Ray.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with the letter Beth just wrote. I just think, you know, it's important to stress that none of the conversations I've had with any legislator regarding this project has anybody ever expressed a desire to build a bigger jail. It's simply looking at the old linear style facility that we have, that the Commission of Corrections will no longer approve to be built, and creating a more suitable living environment for the inmates, while at the same time providing a more professional environment for our corrections staff. I don't know where that number lies, if it's 82. I understand that the 82 number was put forward because that's what we're currently able to house. Second thing is with the staffing question and adding unnecessary staffing, if we had 100 inmates right now and I had to have 10 more COs, I wouldn't be able to fill that anyways. And nor would we be able to fill a jail with 100 inmates if we wanted to build something that big with all of the reforms and stuff that has been put in place. I couldn't put 100 people in my jail if I wanted to. It's just not doable with, raise the age and bail reform and things like that. So to me, it's looking at a facility that's more suitable and provides a better living space for the inmates that do have to be here, while also adding the much needed space for programs, things of that nature that we also can't perform. So I agree with what everybody said, and I don't think we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, so to speak, with the writers of the letter and what we've been thinking. I think we're kind of all on the same page, needing just to simply improve the facility that we do have.
Thank you. Travis.
Is it possible to do something like this where we move it forward, we look at a price for 82 beds and 62 beds, right? I'm just making up the 62, but a lower amount. See what the price difference is. In the meantime, we can work with folks to talk about what they would like to see happen in that facility. I think you could do two things at one time. We can get it cost out for two different sizes and have conversations about what would go on in the jail and what it should look like, what it should feel like for folks. And by the time we get that other information, we could have this plan worked out. But we could do two things at one time.
Yeah, and certainly I would say committee chairs change every year, and maybe I won't be the committee chair next year. That could happen. But we carry over, so I will be chairing the committee at least for January, and I'd be happy to hold a public hearing and receive public comment on this issue if that would be useful. Veronica, and then Mike.
Thank you. On the subject of the 82 beds versus 62, or I was going to make up the number 60, whatever. We talked about whatever we're going to build would stand for 50 years, or something along those lines, and so I do think it makes sense to plan for not just to anticipate, but to intend to keep our jail population down, if not reduce it further. I think everyone's been excited about the success of the alternatives to incarceration. I've heard that from a lot of people, and so I think it's exciting to see what that has done. I don't know if there's been a comprehensive report about that ever, but that would be, I think, somewhat as a side note, cool to publicize. But also, I think it makes sense to try to keep pushing in that direction instead of assuming that this is the best that we can do, because it's probably not. So, and on that note, I hear that board outs are not good, and we'd like to avoid them because they are, they're not helpful for people. But it's also not good to, for example, have someone end up in jail when maybe what they really should have ended up in that would have been helpful to is a house, and there isn't one. So there, for instance, doing something against the law visibly in public instead of inside of their house, or to end up in jail in order to detox from drugs because we don't have a crisis center or a detox center. So there's things in both directions that would be good to avoid, and we could maybe think about in the same conversation, in the same long set of conversations, putting money into even other institutions and even other physical structures that keep people out of the jail instead of keep people out of jail entirely, as opposed to specifically keep people out of other counties' jails. So that is my little speech on that, but then I have some questions about the, because both in the letter and maybe you, Rich, were talking about like state regulations and funding around number of beds and things. So what does the state require in terms of numbers of beds in the jail, if anything? And also I see in the letter something about, or I think it was in the letter, about the required staffing for the jail being based on the capacity and not the number of people held in the jail at any given time. And I wonder if someone can clarify that, just for more information.
Ray or Sheriff?
Go ahead, Ray. You want to answer that? I can do it, but I'd let you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. To talk about staffing, I mean, that there certainly would be a staffing analysis done in any facility that we build, but, you know, we're talking about modular. A new style jail is a modular system, which allows you to have more inmates supervised by one officer. Now, that mean a decrease in the number of staff that we have right now? I'm not sure that that would happen at this point, not from the plans that I've seen yet. If we talk about 3 pods, that would be 3 posts similar to what we have right now. So that's, I think the current staffing would be able to move into the new jail in a similar fashion. There may be some spaces for staff savings here and there. But in general, I think the staff would be similar to what we're at right now. So.
Just to amplify on that, Captain, with a pod system, you get far better visibility, so you don't have to do the half-hour rounds. And so there's a safety issue for the inmates from that direction, right? And for the corrections officers. I mean, that's really the benefit of the pod system, as I see it. Is that fair? And also, could you talk about classification and just the differential that you need to maintain to be able to classify?
Sure. I mean, in a jail, there's adult males, adult females, and then among those classes, there would be a higher class and a lower class. That's how it's a number system that we do. So we do that for each inmate, and we would need to be able to separate those 4 groups.
Well, Mike, I've been keeping you waiting. Why don't you go ahead?
No, you haven't been keeping me waiting. That was a great answer, because that's kind of what it touches on what I was going to say. I think sometimes, and I see it happening a little bit here, we get really hung up on the number of beds in the jail. And I don't know if that's the number we should really kind of hang our hat on. I think it's more important of how many people we have in the jail. You know, we have done a great job with alternatives to incarceration. And I don't want people to think that we're not exploring other avenues, too, for things that I hope, personally, will keep people out of jail. We'll get to these problems earlier. Like, right now, we're debating this $6.5 million fund. And right now, anyway, $1.5 million is going to go to a mental health stabilization unit. I hope that will have an impact. And how big that impact will be, I don't know. But what Bunce just said, I think, is important. I mean, these classifications, I don't think we had. I mean, we had some of them, obviously, back in '86, but they've certainly taken on more prominence to the point whereas while it may have been an 82-bed jail and that was sufficient in '86, we're going to have empty beds, I hope. I don't think we're going to need to fill all 82, but it would just seem to me that if we could hold that number and just keep the population down, and if we were to build something new, we would be adding programming to the jail. The medical facility up there is just horrible, and I think that's something we need to fix. With all of that said, this vote today is really, I feel, a vote on whether we need to do something or whether we are going to keep the status quo. I mean, this is going to go to another committee. And I'm not passing off our responsibility on them. We're going to be active participants in whatever they come up with. But for our purposes here, it's a matter of saying, listen, F&I, we believe we need to do something here. What are your thoughts on it? What can this county do? How much are we willing to spend? How much are we willing to invest? And that's what I kind of see the purpose of this vote today as.
Okay. Dan?
I'll just be very brief because I've listened to a lot of these conversations, but I always harken back to what happened in a neighboring county that had a catastrophic system failure and had to basically close their jail on an emergency basis, farm all of their inmates out to other counties while they repaired significant roof leak. And I don't, we keep putting patches on antiquated systems. Eventually, it would seem to me it becomes more and more likely that you're going to have a catastrophic system failure. And if you don't have a plan in place, we're going to be looking at a lot of board out costs and an emergency decision to do something rather than being able to plan for it and move ahead in a planned fashion. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anybody else? I've repeatedly said I think this is one of the most important decisions this committee will make this year. But I feel we're ready to take the vote, but I don't want to shut anybody down. If so, I'd ask somebody to move the resolution. Travis moves. Mike seconds. Further discussion. And this is a resolution in support of evaluating the feasibility of renovating the public safety building, ID 11373. I would just say in comment, I reiterate, I'd be happy to hold public hearings, and we're not done talking about this. This will be an ongoing discussion, and we should invite and expect a lot of public input. So, Veronica.
I'd like to express or add, I guess I don't have wording for a motion, but an intention to hold public conversation and forum on this, not as a hearing where people have to come to us, but like where we go to them, well, I don't know where I'd look to okay, well, this
Happy
is
to do that.
This is why, because I don't have all the information right now. So I would look to people like Claire, Travis, based on your leadership, or to the people at OAR and others, to or the folks dealing with drug abuse issues that land people in jail. Things like that. So I don't have a particular plan I'm proposing that I'd be ready to schedule now, but can we do that? Can we go out to the community to talk to them instead of just inviting them here louder?
Sure, if that's a better way to go about it. I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but Veronica, I'd be happy to do that. I'd go listen. I don't know that we need to put language in the resolution, but I would certainly do that. Okay, anything further? Are we ready to vote? I'll call the roll. Mike?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
No.
And the chair votes yes. So that passes. So the report and the resolution will go on to the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, and more to come there. So thank you, everybody, for your work on that. Next item on our agenda is the district attorney. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Rich. In the context of talking about the jail, I did some research last month for the CJATI meeting, and I think it's important that we know the context of national jail numbers compared to our jail numbers. My goal is to keep people out of jail. And I look at the jail population, I look at the people, the individuals in the jail every day. we have this list that we get that shows who's in the jail. Our average numbers, I think, are 45 per month. Nationally, per 100,000 people, the average jail population is 167. And that's down from 224 in 2019. So I think we need to recognize those numbers, that we're at 45 and the national average is 167 per 100,000. And so we're significantly better than the average, and probably in the top 0.1% nationally as far as jail population, if we're talking about keeping the numbers down. And just, one comment, we don't ever advocate for someone to be in jail because of drug abuse. And this may be semantics, but when someone is in the system for drug-related problems, and they're clearly in our system because of drug struggles with substance abuse, and they end up in treatment court, they sign a contract, and the contract says with the judge, we understand that relapses happen. You're not going to jail for a relapse. You're going to jail because if you lie about it. We expect that people relapse. But if you're not honest and you don't follow the rules of the program, that's what puts people in jail, and they're given a jail sanction because that's part of the contract. So we're never putting people in jail because of drug abuse or substance abuse. It doesn't happen here. So, I think, we want to be honest with each other, and having that information is important to talk, honestly about the issues that we're facing in the county. Other than that, we're busy. I'm working on reimagining, working on the, various things, but happy to take any questions at this point.
No, Matt, thank you for those comments. And I guess I'd add to the statistics you gave us. Historically, we have been running much lower numbers, and we have not seen higher crime rates than comparable communities. Certainly if you're not incarcerating people and you've got a lot more crime, you haven't done very much. But we've accomplished it here without seeing the corresponding rise in crime. So I think that's a testament that the alternatives do really make a difference. And having gone to NISAC and presented on this issue of what the power of alternatives to incarceration can be, I know that other counties in upstate just are nowhere near what we're doing. They talk about alternatives to incarceration, but it's not the comprehensive system we've adopted. And frankly, I think we can really serve as a model. It is interesting. We've gotten very little attention, despite we have talked about it. I think people just don't believe that it actually can work. Anyway, I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox. Anybody have questions or comments for our district attorney? Okay, thank you. Department of Emergency Response. And I see Jessica and Michael are with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just two things I wanted to report out on. First, I'm really pleased to announce that we have 3 dispatcher trainees. They're undergoing our 4-month dispatcher training and should be wrapping up that training in February or March. So we're really happy about that. The other thing I wanted to announce, and some folks on the call are aware because they were part of the process on Tuesday, but we added another element to our radio redundancy on Tuesday by adding a component in our radio system that if we were to go completely dark here on Brown Road, that we would not lose radio communication with our public safety partners. So we did test that on Tuesday, and it went very well. And what we did is we simulated that the system here on Brown Road went down, and we were able to maintain radio communication throughout the county. And it doesn't just affect public safety partners. We have a lot of other private sector partners as well, like the hospital and the school systems, for example, that share our radio system. So it's really nice to have that piece done.
Good news.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions or comments for Department of Emergency Response? We have a series of resolutions. First one, authorization to accept fiscal year 2020 cybersecurity grant, Department of Emergency Response, ID 11358. Could I get that on the floor? Travis moves. Veronica seconds. Questions, comments? I'll call the vote. Mike?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Then we have authorization to accept fiscal year 2022 State Homeland Security Program Grant, Department of Emergency Response, ID 11359A. And could I get that moved? Veronica moves. Mike seconds. Questions or comments? I'll call the roll. Mike?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And we have authorization to accept fiscal year 2020 State Homeland Security Program Grant, Department of Emergency Response, ID 11360. Could I get that moved? Veronica moves. Travis seconds. Questions or comments? The money's raining down on emergency response.
Yeah, just curiosity question. Why do we have fiscal year 2020 resolutions happening now?
That is a good question.
Part of it's a delay on the state's part. Part of it's a slight delay on our part in spending previous year's grant monies. So now we're at a point where we're going to be spending that year's grant monies in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department. So that was just a series of different delays.
Glad we still get to have them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Mike?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We then have authorization to accept fiscal year 2022 Domestic Terrorism Prevention Grant, Department of Emergency Response, ID 11361. Could I get a motion on that? Mike moves, Veronica seconds. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mike?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And then the next one is the one that is replaced. So look outside of your packet. This is authorization to accept fiscal year 2021 State Homeland Security Program Grant, Department of Emergency Response, ID 11378. Could I get that moved? Travis moves, Mike seconds. All right. Any questions or comments on that one? I'll call the roll. Mike?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And we're moving on. I think that's all for the Department of Emergency Response. Is there anything else you want to talk to us about?
No, thank you. Does everybody drive safe tonight?
Okay, that's right. We're looking for the storm. We have Department of Probation and Community Justice. And I see Dan and I think Carlo is here. Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
I don't see any resolutions, but I had asked if you could talk a little bit about the training you arranged and had presented last week. Veronica and I attended. I was really impressed with it, and maybe you could just share a little bit about it with the rest of the people visiting.
I'm happy to, or do you want to speak about it, Carla? You're the one who lined it all up, or I'm happy to give an overview. I'm prepared to do that.
Yeah, I can speak about it for a minute. Thanks, Dan. So this individual was somebody, I attended a training put on, it was about 6 years ago. It was put on by DCJS, and it was a trauma training. Trauma was actually an acronym, and I couldn't for the life of me tell you all what it stands for at this point, but it was trauma is what the training was. And it was 3 days of many, many, many different speakers. A lot of law enforcement officers, retired law enforcement, veterans. And with all of the speakers that I heard over the course of those 3 days, this individual, his story has stuck with me ever since then. And I think it was because it's not your average story. You expect law enforcement officers to experience trauma. You expect combat veterans to experience trauma. This individual, a lot of the trauma was in his own personal life. And while he is a veteran, the trauma that he incurred while he was serving was not combat related. So I guess it kind of struck me as a probation officer, because that's the kind of trauma that we experience. It's more vicarious trauma. It's not in your face, you know, an immediate traumatic incident. It's just more years and years and years of built up vicarious trauma. So by asking Scott to come and speak, that was really the point that I was trying to get across to my department, to the law enforcement officers that were there, the legislators. I know that JR was there, Director of Veterans Affairs. So, you know, just reminding all of us that everybody's trauma is different. And, you know, while what this individual experienced, I think even one of those events would have been enough for any of us to throw in the towel. He had several incredibly traumatic events, and he's made it through. So his whole message is really about suicide prevention, suicide awareness, what you can do if you know, what are some of the signs to be looking for in yourself and other people. Just a very, very powerful, powerful presentation that hopefully reminds everybody that at the end of the day, there is hope. And, you know, we do focus a lot, we train our probation officers on being trauma informed and watching for those signs in the clients that we serve, but it's just as important that we look for those signs of trauma in ourselves. So that hopefully was the message that we got across by asking Scott to come and speak.
I think you really did. It was very powerful. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. Thank you. I would just like to add that there were 52 attendees, 32 from the probation department, 20 from police agencies, and the addition of 2 legislators and JR from veterans. JR is looking to do a follow-up regional training with Scott and some of the veterans groups. So I think it would be very poignant for that group, since so much of his traumatic experiences happened in the military despite not being in a combat role. Some of the feedback we got, we wished he had talked a little bit more about NILEAP, which is the New York Law Enforcement Assistance Program. We're going to do our own research about that and share that information with the department here and with any of the partners who attended. They offer a lot of support for law enforcement and their families who are experiencing trauma, or just really a lot of different types of negative things that can occur. And they offer 3-day trainings for critical incident debriefing, lots of support and linkages to longer term programs for anyone struggling with substance abuse, mental health issues. So we want to really back up what we learned 2 weeks ago by following up with what services are available on an ongoing basis for people.
Veronica, you were there. Did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just agree. It was like really powerful story to hear. And something I liked about how this guy shared his story was he sort of emphasized the things, like described in detail the things that led up to the traumatic experiences in ways that, at least for me, it seemed to illustrate how this could happen to anybody. Or you could be like, you know, just going along, living your life, doing your job, and you don't have to be unusual in some way. And then I also appreciated, I think as maybe Rich said, that he and I and Dan and JR got to chat afterwards. And Dan, you were telling us about how the culture you cultivate in the probation department about checking in with each other's well-being, like among your employees, and talking about things. Because I think another big message of like the speaker's story was that he, like, for decades tried so hard to not talk about the trauma he experienced and masked it really well for a long time. And then eventually it was too much, and it, was very destructive until he did talk about it. So it's really heartening to see that that's a part of the culture in your department. And I hope that that everyone will take, that like the other attendees are able to take that piece home as well.
And a big piece of that is really, we do definitely check in with each other, but a lot of people we work with, especially if it's something going on in their personal life, they keep it very, very close. They really don't want to share that. They want their professional and personal lives to be separate. So I think that's where it really comes into play, that we're paying very close attention to people's mannerisms and, has their behavior changed in some way that's not normal for them, and just really paying very close attention to each other.
And that's a credit to two of our staff who have retired in the past. Pat Buchel and Dave Wolf were very involved in getting a peer support program developed here, which we've continued. We see a lot more of that developing in police agencies and things, and it's a very helpful tool because you can go and talk with someone who kind of understands what you do on a day-to-day basis without having to, formalize, just to get things off your chest, to blow off a little steam as it's building up, rather than let things build up to the point where you're suffering negative consequences or using negative coping mechanisms. I think it's been effective here for a lot of folks. We have very unfortunate instances happen where people that we're working with commit suicide or overdose and die or have really negative outcomes. And I think it's unhealthy to not talk about those things and just bottle it up. So we're trying to realize that if you've experienced a traumatic event, the sooner that you talk about that, the less negative impact it's going to have. And I think that's the culture that's developing in law enforcement as a profession. And I think it's borne out well here with our peer support program. It's done good things for our staff. And Rich, I messaged you or the group just in that vein. We have a 37-year employee who's retiring today.
Oh.
Who would like to say a few words to the committee, if that's okay.
I would love to hear a few words.
All right,
yes,
I will go get her. It's Jan Gorovich. She's been here for 37 years.
Yes.
I will try to show you. This is Jan when she started as an intern, and this is Jan now. So she's been here a very long time. She's been just a constant source of encouragement and wisdom to so many people. She is trained better than half the people in this department when they came in as new officers, and I think she has some quick insights that she would just like to share with the group. So I'll go get her real quick.
Yes, please. In the meantime, I'd make some comments on the trauma training. It was, as everybody said, very powerful. One interesting aspect was this guy struggled and struggled and struggled, and his success finally entailed a dog. That there was a program he got engaged with that provided him with a dog. He had to earn the right to get the dog, but somehow that clicked for him and gave him a path back. And it was really interesting to me how that path is such an individual thing. For him, it was the dog. And really good. I also thought the presentation dovetailed very well with what we've talked about with reimagining public safety, that one element is officer wellness, and we really need to think about that and how we can accomplish it, or do better at it. Anyway.
You can click on the camera.
I hear the approach of Jan Gorovich.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for talking with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, please, this is great. Thank you for talking with us, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you. Well, it has been a pleasure working for this department. The people here, you will never hear me say anything but singing their praises. They're amazing people, and the work is rewarding, and 37 years, and I still love what I do and love the people I do it with. So I've been blessed. That's all I can say.
Do you have any advice for us going forward?
I've been asked that a lot lately. I think the advice is just believe in what the people here at the probation department do. You know, Dan's
and all the service providers.
And all the service providers. I mean, Dan's leading a ship of really devoted people, and we do it because we care. We don't do it because it's our job. So, you know, just listen to what we have to say and support us, and I think it'll be great for the community.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Good.
All right, I'll give you Dan back.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I'm glad you brought her to our meeting.
But kind of impromptu, I didn't bring her around here so she could tell you to listen to what we say and do what we tell you. But I think she's all out of summarizing her wisdom into just a handful of words, but she's been just a fantastic asset to this department. And, you know, almost 4 decades of service to the county is an impressive feat.
Absolutely.
So I know we've taken a lot of time today. I can give you a couple real quick other updates.
Yes.
We had four officers complete the 80-hour instructor development course today, which is the prerequisite for becoming certified trainers in a variety of law enforcement topics. These will be the first 4 certified trainers that we've had in a long time. They'll be an asset to the department as well as to other departments locally and in the region. And just a wrap up for Cops, Kids, and Toys, which finished yesterday. They serve over 430 families and over 1,000 children. We had a lot of help this year. It was really nice to see that the police agencies were able to, even though they're shorthanded, get a lot of staff in. There was a lot of representation from the Sheriff's Department, the troopers, IPD, Cornell and Ithaca College, the DEC, and all the local PDs in the county. So that's a real testament to the good-heartedness and the compassion that these police officers have for, you know, helping the less fortunate. So there's going to be a lot of happy kids for the holidays that, you know, may have had a less happy encounter. It takes a lot of the less happy holiday and takes a lot of pressure off of families who are struggling financially now. So it was a great thing to be a part of, as always.
Thank you for everybody's work on that. It's a really good thing. Any further questions? I know we didn't go into the enhanced sentencing report and the jail booking monthly snapshot, but if anybody had any questions about those, looks like things are.
I have it up. Things are trending upwards a little bit towards the end of the year as far as overall numbers. October, November, we're close to 200 new individuals that we're working with. Beginning of the year, it was more an average of 160, 170. So it's trending upwards a little bit. A lot of pretrial work.
Do you see any reason for that trend?
Typically at the end of the year, a lot of the courts that have had cases pending try to clear them out sort of before the close of the calendar year. So that is not unusual. We tend to see that October, November, December, our numbers will go up a little bit, just as cases get resolved.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to step off a little early. I've got a little bit of a drive to get home, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, take care.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything further for the Probation Community Justice Department? Jen, did you have something? I saw a hand go up. No?
Oh, no, sorry. I'm just stretching.
Not allowed. Not allowed. We have the assigned counsel program, and I saw Lance was there. He is. Welcome, Lance. How are you?
Good, Rich. I'm good. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll be real quick. Probably welcome on a day with weather like today, but nothing really to update you on. Everything's moving along. We have a bunch of things we hope to finalize. Probably our next meeting report can update. You know, we have some things signed and in hand, but other than that, we're just carrying on. hope everyone has a happy holiday.
Okay. Any questions for assigned counsel? That was a quick report. But you don't have to go on at length if everything's working as it should. I assume you're addressing the issues of finding enough counsel?
We are. We've added, I thought I mentioned this last month, maybe I didn't. We've added 3 new attorneys over the last couple months. We have some other irons in the fire. We're working on that issue. With the new Sigler PD, we're going to be doing some CLEs, trying to pull in newly admitted attorneys. You know, the ultimate thing, of course, is going to be resolution of the rates. I can probably give you a better sense next month of where that's at. I mean, I've learned some things this month that are kind of where the roadblock is, so to speak, in Albany. I guess I'm not sure what I reported last month, so I'll give you a 30-second overview on that. The New York State Bar Association has filed a lawsuit over the rates seeking an immediate injunction, similar to the New York City one for the entire state, moving rates. The Hurl Herring lawsuit, the plaintiffs have gone back into court now and are filing. They had quietly been seeking to try to negotiate a resolution for the Hurl Herring counties, which would be, Sigler, with the state paying the cost, and that broke down. Problem there seems to be the real impetus in Albany. The block is the state budget director is opposed. That's a powerful voice in terms of budget issues. And I'm not sure how active the governor's general counsel has been involved in this. I think they've had other, there was an election, other things going on. So there's a lot of litigation that's going to be picking up speed that may help resolve this down the road in 2023. Is kind of a 30-second snapshot.
Okay, that's enough for now. Maybe we'll have a better picture in January. So,
yeah.
Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there any other business to come before the Public Safety Committee? Seeing no outburst. I did want to say thank you to everybody. This has been a busy year. I think 2023 will be equally busy. We've certainly set ourselves some work to do going forward. I'm thinking that the jail will be a continuing area of work, but also, Reimagining hopefully will continue on track. And I think we're going to have a lot of discussion about ambulance service in the year to come. So the work continues. But thank you to everybody. I hope everybody has a really good holiday and drive safe.